Hello and welcome to DNA of the Soul, a podcast meant to explore the cultural impacts video games have both in and out of their subculture. I'm your host, James117, joined today by Matt.
I need a weapon.
Joe.
Punished Venom Joe.
And Kai.
That's Noble Kai to you.
Today we are covering Halo 1 for the Xbox original.
We will be spoiling the plot of Halo Combat Evolved. We're not going to advise you to play the entire game alone, though. It's actually probably better to play it as co-op. The game is so much fun in a multiplayer situation. So, if you have someone that will play along with you, probably should go pick up a friend, go play some Halo 1 on its own. Then come back. Otherwise, you're probably only missing 2 plot points, but that's our disclaimer.
We'll also add a small disclaimer that we will also be spoiling aspects of the Marathon series, which is a kind of soft prequel to Halo, but not really. But it's very unlikely that many of our viewers will go on to play Marathon. It is quite an old game. Now, I would also like to give some acknowledgements before we move any further. I would like to give some shout-outs to Noodle from YouTube, Mandalore Gaming, also from YouTube, Martin O'Donnell and his podcast. He is the composer for many of the Halo games, and to my own mother, who gave me some comments for today's program. Alright, so, as previously mentioned, today we will be covering Halo for Xbox. This was a launch title for the Xbox original, alongside Shrek 1, and the situation at Bungie was that they were originally making shooters exclusively for the Mac, with Marathon 1. Then with Marathon 2, they made a port to PC, and then after their third entry in that series, Marathon Infinity, Microsoft contacted them and offered to buy them out. They also had some small financial issues going into all that. We'll cover more later. The source cause of which was Myth 2 Soulblighter for the PC. Now, for a quick background on Bungie. The original team was made up of 3 individuals: Jason Jones, the programmer, Colin Brent, who did the arts and enemies, and then their business associate, Alex Seropian. So these were the 3 men who created Bungie, essentially, and they started out with things like NOP, which is a freeware version of Pong, and Pathways into Darkness, which was an FPS for the Mac, which actually won an award for getting the role-playing game of the year when it was created, when, it was backed by 3 people, which is pretty cool. Pathways into Darkness is its own separate topic we're not getting into today, but suffice it to say, it's also got a fairly intriguing plot. All of the Bungie FPS games are associated with having well thought out narratives, and they even link together sometimes in interesting ways. So, those 3 gentlemen met in college, and the Pathways into Darkness game was a commercial success. It allowed them to buy an office in Chicago, which is where they wound up doing most of their work.
Bungie's composer, Martin O'Donnell, which we mentioned him earlier, remembered that the studio's location, a former girls' school next to a crack house, smelled like a frat house after a really long weekend. We like him.
These were some guys out of college who started their own business, and they were very much about that pizza and Coke lifestyle production cycle of producing code and shipping it. So they made decent money making games, and they eventually became 3 teams, including one that worked out of a separate location, and that group went on to develop Oni on the PlayStation 2, which was Bungie's first foray into consoles, which was something they'd become very well known for later, and the first of which was Marathon. We are going to take a small sidetrack on Marathon, because it is the single greatest influence on Halo as a game, and it was originally, as previously mentioned, it was going to link back into Halo in some ways. That symbol of a circle inside of a circle with a line under it that you can see in several places throughout Halo, it's the face of the AI Guilty Spark, who's very important to the plot. That symbol, also called the Reclaimer Glyph, was originally from Marathon. It's on basically all of the advertising material and branding of Marathon. Now, Marathon is a game about basically a Doom protagonist. You're a guy, you shoot all the aliens. That's the basic premise of Marathon. But underneath that, a lot of bizarre stuff is happening, like enemies randomly get teleported in around you, or sometimes if you walk into a corner of the map, a bunch of ammo and guns will spawn in that you hadn't seen before. And the question of how this all happened is due to what's going on with the narrative underneath that all. It is about a war between AI. The one that you work for is kind of insane. His name is Durandal. And sometimes Durandal, to help you out, will spawn you in more guns and stuff. and he makes fun of you a little bit for kind of the high action adrenaline gameplay the Marathon had. He'd say things like, "You really like killing all these aliens, don't you? Well, here's some more guns. Go do it. It's what you do best, after all." And throughout all the Marathon games, your interactions with Durandal as he fights these other AI are moderately compelling. And at some point, your relationship with him, if you bother to read all the narrative information there is about Marathon out there, you start to see that he goes from being this very standoffish, arrogant, kind of just extraordinarily selfish individual to basically going, "You are the only reason I've managed to survive this long. You're basically my father, and I appreciate everything you've done for me." And it's actually pretty powerful writing for, a Doom clone from the 90s. So there were two other major projects developed by Bungie around this time. The first was Myth, which originally sold really well, and they made a little bit of a mistake with Myth 2. Myth 2 Soul Blighter had a bug where if you uninstalled the game on an external drive, it would proceed to delete everything else on that drive along with it.
Whoops.
That was a bit of a mistake. They had to recall something like 50,000 copies of Myth 2, and Bungie as a company went from doing really well to doing not so well. Meanwhile, the third development studio developed Oni, which, as before mentioned, was developed for the PS2. And that's important for later because it was kind of how they got their company in the door for consoles. They'd been in talks with Activision previously about being acquired by them, and eventually they would wind up going to Microsoft. So, they wound up being bought by Microsoft to help them deal with the whole on the verge of collapse thing. The development of Halo was not so much fun. It was apparently quite tumultuous. They went through several different builds of the game. They went through scrapping several different features, and in the last 4 months of development, they scrapped the entirety of the multiplayer and started again from scratch because the internal stakeholders said, "This is not fun. This is not what we want." That kind of reflects the attitude of what was going on at Bungie at the time, and they were definitely overworking themselves trying to ship the product out the door for the Xbox original. So, on one final note on Bungie as a company, they are currently owned by Sony Interactive, which is quite the journey from, starting out making shooters exclusively to the Mac, working with Microsoft as closely as they did for that buyout, and then going independent, and now they're not so independent anymore.
I think if you told somebody, like, when this game came out, like, or a year after this game came out, that they'd eventually be owned by Sony, like the Xbox rival, they I don't think they'd believe you.
There's no way.
Like being told, they would go on to make the PS4 star, I guess, Destiny, and then Destiny 2, which is actually still pretty actively played to this day, kind of which my friend worked on the art team for that, and I lost my train of thought.
Well, does your dad also work at Microsoft?
Yeah, my dad is Bill Gates.
He's gonna get banned on Xbox
Impressive.
Live. Don't shoot me.
Nope, you are officially branded as a noob. And I'm talking the NOOB noob,
Damn.
not NEWB noob.
Yeah, well, James, you're an N00B noob.
Whoa, guys.
Oh, that's a pretty far accusation
Guys,
there.
we're trying to keep it like PG.
Don't make me come over there.
I
No, not make
Bring
me
it.
come over there.
bring it, noob.
Whoa.
Okay, this is
Guys.
derailed too far.
So, Halo's mechanics. We're going to give a bit of a background of the mechanics of the game that helped it stand out at the time. The first of which is the decently intelligent enemy AI. For a 3D game from 2001, the actual ways enemies interact with you as a player changes pretty dynamically based on what you're shooting them with. So if you huck a plasma grenade into a grunt, for example, he'll panic and run in a random direction and usually wind up blowing up a bunch of other guys with him. But if you throw a plasma grenade on an elite, he'll run directly at you and then try to take you with him. There's personality to the enemies.
They also at least the elite grunts, at least make attempts to dodge your shots. They'll like duck and try to dodge to the side and take cover if they can, which was crazy advanced for the time.
Personally, I always found it really fun when you'd run up to the grunts, and it's because you were so much bigger than them, they'd go into a panic and start running in random directions.
They scream, "Get away from me, please."
Right. The grunt voice lines are also a highlight. just their panic in their voice.
The voice acting in general is pretty good in Halo 1, especially for a game from 2001 when we were just starting to accept that good voice acting could exist in video games. I believe Myth also had really good voice acting, that series on the PC we mentioned earlier. And while the Xbox original didn't have the best audio quality in the world, you could still tell that how Master Chief was supposed to sound was very specifically crafted for him. He's supposed to sound that way and look that way. It's good stylization.
Compare that to 5 years ago, 1996, the original Resident Evil coming out with like meme-worthy voice acting that they just, took the first take of, and it was atrocious. And then going to Halo, with fantastic voice acting, it accelerated quickly.
So to continue on to other mechanics, one of the interesting things I wanted to bring up was the fact that there's no sprinting, which originally I thought was because of other games, like other shooters have sprinting. Then looking at the timeline, Halo came out first. So it's interesting just not have sprinting in a game to where movement is important because you're getting shot at. And on those harder difficulties, on harder levels, not being able to move fast is a problem. It makes the game more challenging, actually.
Yeah,
In the famous words of Master Chief, I would not be caught dead sprinting.
Yeah, it just really makes a lot of the on-foot gameplay feel a bit sluggish, in my opinion.
It also, though, is interesting because he's in this giant armor. It kind of a little bit mechanically makes sense. He can't run because, you put on 300 pounds of space armor. Good luck running.
Say the line, Kai.
All I was going to say was, I don't remember now.
Armor lock, armor lock, armor lock, armor lock.
Armor lock. No, but I was just going to bring up the fact that I don't know about you guys, but whenever I am playing like a first-person shooter, I always think, click the left stick, I go faster. But going back playing the original Halo, that wasn't a thing. It was jarring to me at first because every shooter I had played had a sprint mechanic of some form. Like even Halo Reach later added sprinting as an ability, but just not having it as an option was kind of jarring.
It was kind of inherited from other shooters like Doom, where the idea is that you approach each situation roughly at the same speed, so that you don't actually get somewhere faster than your reflexes can respond to, since Halo's not necessarily about constant adrenaline. It's about figuring out as Master Chief, how do I get past these huge barricades of aliens that are between me and my objective.
It also makes sure you actually go through the barricade as a fight rather than just running past them, which you can totally do in other games.
You can do that in Halo as well, but you are significantly more limited in your movement. Yes.
And the enemies will come for you.
They will chase you. Now, there are a number of friendlies in Halo who try to assist you, particularly in the single-player campaign. When we were doing some research for this game, me and Joe were enjoying some time in a Warthog, and he repeatedly...
Yeah, some guys kept running up to get in my Warthog to assist me, and I kept flipping the Warthog and crushing them under it, and they all died, and really, it was just sacrifices for the cause. They would be happy to have died in such a manner. I guarantee it. I speak for them entirely.
NPC salutes. Sir, I will use my service to make sure that I get flipped under this Warthog.
The first time Joe found out he could just punch out a friendly NPC, though, and send them flying.
Oh, I just decked a guy straight in the face. I was just like, I did not mean to press the melee button there, but I guess I just did, and now I know how people get ammo in this game.
It was right after complimenting him, too.
How's your house? A nice punch.
In later games, I believe they introduced the ability to ask nicely for the Marines' weapons, so you don't have to do that.
So you don't have to kill them.
Because their guns are better than John Chief's, and that's just not allowed.
It's weird that, the best guy on the job would have the worst equipment.
Well, when he woke up from stasis, he had literally no weapons, and Captain Keyes gives him his pistol, which he claims is not loaded, but thankfully Captain Keyes doesn't always say what he means. Another important thing is that Halo Combat Evolved has a huge shift in its gameplay about halfway through, where the Flood are introduced, and totally change the way that you approach most firefights. Because if the Flood get their hands on a corpse, they will reanimate it, and use whatever that enemy was to start fighting you again. So not only do you have to be aware of the enemies coming at you to try to kill you, but you also have to make sure that wherever you down enemies, particularly strong ones like the elites, that they don't get inhabited by new Flood to continue being a problem from you and flanking you from behind.
You killed that enemy? surprise, it's actually alive and behind you because you did not put it in a good place for you to die. And the other thing that's also great about Halo 1 is the fact that its story mode has a co-op mode. And oh my gosh, it is so much better to play that game multiplayer than it is to play it in single player.
I believe it. Crushing my friend instead of crushing a random NPC sounds a lot better.
I do
That
enjoy
is-
throwing grenades at you guys.
I was about to say, it is part of the fun that you can just mess around with your friends, but really the game just plays better. You can take the game in a more strategic play way because you can actually plan with two people like, oh, I'm going to take out this enemy so that it doesn't shoot at me while you are taking care of this small group of enemies. And like, it makes such a difference on it, especially because on some of the harder levels, like right before we started recording, we were playing, what level was that?
Truth and Reconciliation.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there, man, thinking the whole time while I'm playing this on my own, like, I wish I had someone to draw fire while I snipe these guys from the back. And then they're just all like, oh, the enemy's just like, we're coming for you.
Ironically, you would have had a team of Marines helping you with that, but they all died before we got there because they were on the highest difficulty.
So that's not my fault then.
Right. But
I think the
yes.
slower pace kind of complements that co-op aspect of like approaching things tactically, like the lack of sprint, like you're both approaching like say a group and then like they haven't aggroed on you yet. You can slowly plan your approach. And I think the lack of sprinting and slower movement kind of complements that.
That is something that actually changes towards the end of the game and is part of what makes the end of the game memorable, is that you are pursued by high-speed enemies towards the end. Guilty Spark comes at you with flying robots that can shoot at you from basically any angle, and they are pretty relentless, which turns the aggression factor against you up a lot. You're not able to take the game as slowly as you want to anymore. So, Joe, is it easy to navigate through Halo?
As someone who played the first Halo for the first time ever, I had never played a Halo game before. I think a lot of the level design, at least in the early level, because I only really played like the first two, a lot of it was very samey. It was hard to navigate, and I really couldn't tell where I was going until the game popped up with the go to this location marker that just kind of made the entire game more playable for me.
The crazy taxi arrow?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that level did give me the Warthog, which, as someone who does not enjoy FPS gameplay, that was something for me to enjoy in the game, because that is admittedly a lot of fun as someone who does not like the style of game that Halo is.
The Warthog is legitimately incredibly fun in Halo 1. Being able to flip it over, watching it wedge through tiny cracks that no vehicle should ever be able to go through.
I was going to say, Joe, the only reason you like the Warthog is so you could run over Marines. Tell me I'm wrong.
Okay, look. Marines, rocks, aliens. I enjoyed running over anything and everything in my path, especially if it wasn't in my path and I had to go off my path to run it over.
Well, at least you don't discriminate with your vehicular manslaughter.
The 2-hour level took Joe about 2.5 hours, yeah. So, one of the things I appreciate about Halo 1 is that if you do die, you get warped right back to the most recent checkpoint. If you get incredibly lost or you're going the wrong way and you explode, you can now progress from the point you're supposed to be at. And the game's kind of spawns you in such a direction to say, this is generally where you should be going. I know you got lost. Don't worry about it. Just go this way now. And one of the other really interesting points about Halo 1 is that your guns are what you pick up off the ground. A lot of those older era shooters, once you found a weapon, it was yours. It was added to your arsenal. Maybe it was taken away later, but by and large, you'd have as many weapons as you wanted on you at a time. In Halo, you get 2 guns, and they are generally whatever you pick up off the floor. If you run out of ammo for a gun, that's it. That's all the bullets you had for it. And you're going to have to give up the ability to have it for the rest of the level until you find another one. So you need to constantly be changing and adapting your armaments.
And it also brought an aspect of like ammo management, like
yes.
You'd possibly switch to your sidearm for like weaker enemies and then pull out your main weapon for like stronger elites and stuff like that.
It also gave free playability because you could be full on trying to save your ammo with one gun for a level, or just go, I'm just going to use this up as much as possible, kill an enemy, pick up its gun, move on to the next thing until it runs out, pick up the next gun. And it makes it a little like, rather than just being like, oh, I have this weapon, it's it for the level. It's kind of nice to be able to repeat your game and have a little bit of a variety.
Right. And I know we're not supposed to cover this yet, but it also opened the gate for like challenge runs and stuff. Like this weapon only, or like no secondary, stuff like that. Another huge thing this game did was it kind of set the standard for FPS controls. That the twin stick, left stick to move, right stick to aim, right trigger fire. It had existed before, but Halo executed it in such a way that was like you had such good control that it just became the standard. Like some of the other buttons would change, like some games would change the melee button or how you throw a grenade, but for the most part, the twin sticks for move and aim and right triggered fire became a standard. And a large part of this was also how large Halo's multiplayer became. They saw like how massive Halo was online, like people playing it online. So other companies saw that and said they saw that this control method was like easy to adapt to and learn. So it kind of became a standard.
I'm so glad it's that, because there are some games with shooting, like old GoldenEye, one of the controller sets is A button to shoot, and my god, feels so weird now.
I recognize the game's iconic, but GoldenEye's controls hurt my hands.
That's the controller doing that, unfortunately.
Also, yeah, it being on an N64 doesn't help.
The Duke is not a ton better, but it's serviceable enough. It was evolving. It eventually gets to being a normal controller.
It was combat evolving.
Yes, it was evolving for combat, as we will later discuss.
The original model in all of its chonky glory was serviceable, but I think once the S model came out, that made it more akin to like a modern Xbox controller. I think is where Microsoft started to get their groove with controller design, and then they nailed it with the next console, but that's not what we're talking about.
Now, Joe, this was your first encounter with Halo as a product, I believe.
I had played local multiplayer before with some people, and it didn't really tickle my fancy then either.
Were you surprised at the kind of layered story that Halo has, the narrative, just more than John Chief shoots the aliens and goes home?
The story being a bit more nuanced is not really a surprise given what was going on at the time, but as someone who had never played the games before, I did feel that it was a bit more complex and nuanced than I would have thought as an outsider who had never played the game before.
For me personally, that also was very true. I never played Halo 1 up until about a year ago, and finding out that how much more was going on in their universe and kind of the consequences it had and the stakes at play was very eye-opening for me. It makes me question things about later games that I played.
On to another thing that I really want to talk about is also, like I said, was talking about guns earlier. The guns of Halo feel so much fun. Like, specifically the Needler is one of those things where you look at it, you're like, oh, this looks cool, and then you shoot it for the first time, you're like, oh, the concept of the weapon that you get to see the ammo leave it is great.
The way it looks and feels is awesome. I wish it worked a bit better in Halo 1.
Okay, yeah, in Halo 1 it's a little jankier, but still, it feels so cool to be like, okay, I'm going to load this guy up and explode.
Yep.
It's probably up there on top weapons of feels good when you're using it, and you're like, yes.
The reload for the Needler is incredibly satisfying.
Honestly, a lot of the reload animations in this game are very satisfying.
The way he loads up the shotgun by just perfectly rhythmically inserting each round into the chamber. Yeah.
Reminds me of the Doom 2 double barrel. The way it's just like 2 frames of him putting in the shells. But
those 2 frames are glorious.
Oh yeah, they're great. It's just, a bit choppy.
Kai, how many games had a regenerating shield before Halo?
Yeah, that's another point. Halo was smart thinking in how it could introduce regenerative health in a lore way that made sense. So it introduced the energy shield mechanic, which was it essentially added 2 layers to your health. You first had your shield and then Master Chief's actual health. So the shield would slowly regenerate if you hid in cover for a certain amount of time. However, damage to your health was permanent until you found health packs. So obviously this added a story reason for a helpful game mechanic that otherwise wouldn't make sense. Like in Call of Duty, for example, as you're taking damage, the screen will get bloodier, and then you just take cover, and then you're just suddenly fine after a little bit.
I just took 12 bullets, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm good now. Let's get back up and take 12 more.
Right? It was clever, and it gave a reason why that was okay and why that made sense. And I think a lot of games in the future would introduce some form of shield mechanic. The big one being Borderlands.
It to me allows the player to learn with kind of a safety net. They can try different things, and if they don't work out, they can retreat and then spend more time thinking about, okay, that didn't work, what else could I try to do, without it being a permanent detriment to the player, like in Marathon, where if you pulled that off and then walked away, well, now you just have damage to your health.
I was about to say, well, also it lets you test out, but also there's just a tiny bit of a consequence. Because like in Call of Duty, you get shot 12 times, you go behind this thing, you heal up completely, you go out again. In Halo, it's I got shot, my shield broke, I took a point, I go back, get my shield recovered. Okay, I have less tries now. So it rewards you, but also makes you go, you can't do this too much because if you're too risky, then you'll just die. And I like that.
Next up, we have some comments from an outsider's perspective. So, as someone that was coming of age slightly after Halo had released and its heyday, I was at the appropriate age to enjoy these games when 3 was big. And I remember at the time discussing it with my mother, who is the one who made those kinds of decisions on whether we could have them in the house. And the comments that I got from her about that time and what she remembered the games being sold toward in the public was that it was a first-person shooter, kill the military type game, and that for a family of multiple children, it was not the kind of thing that would be introduced into the home even as they got more mature, simply because of the fact that the younger siblings were not mature enough to handle it. And that by comparison, the competition at the time, which was the Nintendo Wii, was a much more chase system to have and own, and was a better fit for a multi-child family. And that the Xbox itself was framed as more the adult or mature system, and that by comparison, the Nintendo games were marketed more as the family console, where everyone can enjoy what they're playing, and that they were not so much real-world die.
I just want to make the comment that it's very true that at the time, the 360 felt like the mature console because the only reason that I got it when I was younger was because I had to essentially say, I would do this thing if you get me an Xbox 360 to my parents. And they were not gamers either, so they didn't know. They were just like, this is the mature one. They're like, okay, fine. So you are right on that.
And as a result, I think that's part of why the Xbox was able to come into its own, because that market hadn't really been explored yet by games, and that was the niche they pushed more into, were the teen and young adult markets. Does anybody else have anything else to add about the gameplay?
I believe we've covered everything that I want to talk about.
I don't have any comments on the gameplay that aren't biased.
That's fine. Please, go right ahead. What do you dislike about the mechanics of shooters like this, Joe?
Personally, for me, first-person shooters all just kind of feel samey, and if they do have something that is specifically setting out to be different than the others, for me, I kind of dislike them. I kind of dislike all the unique mechanics that they put into them. I've just never simply vibed with the general gameplay of a first-person action shooter game. I do, however, enjoy Metroid Prime, as that is a first-person game that is kind of similar to Halo in the fact that it's, a sci-fi FPS game, but it plays hell of a lot different.
It's also much more puzzle-oriented, I would
Yes,
say.
it is a Metroid game just translated into 3D, and they decided to make it a first-person shooter.
Also, the combat in Metroid is not really about the main focus of the game, like you said, because also you have way more health in a Metroid game than you do in Halo.
Interesting point. We did also discover that Metroid Prime Original came out like almost a year after Halo 1 did, right?
Yes, and I do believe that it took some inspiration from Halo with some of the FPS mechanics.
I think that's probably a good thing overall. They found something that worked for them, and I would say Prime took some of the parts that worked well and were able to incorporate that into a better experience in the end. That said, while we're on this topic, would you all say that Halo is all about adrenaline? So Doom, and especially 2016 and Eternal, they kind of have perfected that gameplay loop of go in, take out all the enemies. You're rewarded for taking out the enemies well, quickly, and efficiently. Is Halo that kind of game, or is it more about the tactics and the planning and executing on what you want to accomplish in each scenario?
I'd say Halo 1's probably more about the tactics. I think actually later on there's a little bit less tactics and a little more just you can go in guns blazing. But
Akimbo changes things, yeah.
Yeah, like the harder difficulties on Halo 1, you really have to, like I said, we were playing that one level before, and I was sitting there just at that same spot for 20 minutes trying to figure out this one area. To be fair, I haven't touched a shooter in a while, but also it was more than just run in, shoot everyone, maybe retreat for some health. It was, okay, I need to snipe this turret, I need to throw grenades to kill this small cluster of people, I need to not alert the elite. It's like, you can't just go in guns blazing like you can in Doom.
Right. Doom leaned a lot more into the rip and tear. Like in the later games, it literally says rip and tear until it is done. It encourages fast pace, run in with a shotgun and ask questions later. just go, go, go. Halo's a lot more, you're given a lot of time to see where enemies are before they see you. So you're able to plan your attack much more than in, say, Doom Eternal, where you walk into a room and then you immediately start, like, fire starts getting thrown at you and demons are trying to rip your arms off. It's a lot more tactical, I'd argue.
I think that the future games in Halo made the game a bit too serious, if I'm being honest. The Grunt Birthday Party mechanic, which, Joe, you were not introduced to, but every time you kill a Grunt while that's online, you hear children yelling in joy and confetti is exploded out instead of blood from the enemy.
That sounds incredible.
And the kind of cartooniness that Halo had, like we saw with the Warthog, when Master Chief picks up a Warthog, he really picks up a Warthog. He flips it over. And that kind of cartooniness, Matt, Kai, would you agree with me in that they kind of removed more of that as the series went along with Reach and ODST?
It got a lot more serious and leaned a lot more into, like, its military aspect. It was a lot less, look at that funny alien, he's freaking out because I threw a grenade at him. Now it's like, the universe is going to explode if we don't complete this mission.
I actually have only played stuff up to Reach, so I don't know. So that's ironically one of the places where I Halo Reach, I feel like, I guess it kind of a little bit died down with Halo Reach. And so past that, I was just like, the games were still fun, obviously, but like, I can't tell whether they were less serious or not overall, even more so than Halo Reach. I remember the Halo 3 Skulls being like those fun, like the cheat codes, the old cheat codes of the old days of you type in this cheat code, you get a big head or things like that.
Yep.
And I just think that games in general don't have that as much anymore.
I think is unfortunate because I think Bungie put a lot of work into finding what would be fun for the players with that game, and as more they went along, the more they made Halo as opposed to a strictly fun game. Not to say that 2, 3, and Reach aren't fun games. They are master crafted pieces of work.
The end of Reach still brings tears to my eyes. I salute you, Noble Six.
Did Halo cause the brown and gray shooter craze? Or do you all think that its goal was to be more focused on the alien aspect, on the fantastical world?
I have a question.
Yeah?
What is the brown and gray?
So, brown and gray shooters are the slang term given to Call of Duty, Borderlands, Battlefield, CSGO. Basically, anything where the emphasis is on the combat and the military aspects of it. And this genre absolutely exploded on the 360. It was probably what it's most known for.
Okay, with that being what it is, maybe? I mean, also Call of Duty was there. I think it's the combination of the beginning of Call of Duty plus the beginning of Halo. I mean, like you said, part of it we talked about is the golden era of, like, the controller. Just having good controls for a game was a great way to repeat print things out of, like, oh, we don't have to worry about figuring out how to control the character. We already know how good that is. We just need to make the story.
I think one thing that could have had Halo as part of the brown and gray shooter was that people didn't exactly look at the things that made it special, that being the story and sci-fi elements of it. They just saw, it's a shooter. We're gonna make a shooter with pretty much the same color scheme and not put any soul or life into it. And that's kind of just where FPS games, namely Call of Duty, went down that rabbit hole of just releasing the same game with one new thing every year. And it all just looks the same, and you cannot tell the difference between them because it's just, well, this one has a different gun, and that's it.
Apologies to all the Call of Duty lovers. Just throwing that out there.
I was just about to say, and look where we are now, in the exact same situation.
Gears of War was pretty fun.
Gears of War was fun.
Should Master Chief get glory kills?
Like the Doom style, like takedown. Well, there are some in the multiplayer. There are executions, and those are pretty metal.
I think that a Halo-styled campaign with some of that more adrenaline put in would be really fun. Or if Master Chief just had more ways to engage enemies up close. Although, maybe that is me trying to turn Halo into Doom. So,
Hey, James, there is a way to get up closer. It's called a laser sword.
that's not introduced until 2, and it's very clean in its kills.
Okay. I thought you meant Halo, the series, not just Halo 1. That's different. Okay.
Wait, the laser sword was in 1?
Not as a weapon.
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
You could not- No,
Nope.
you could not
Yeah.
have a weapon.
There were invisible enemies who could kill you with it, but you couldn't pick it up and use it on them.
Right, those things suck. Hated those things.
And finally, what was everyone's favorite gun for first-person shooters? This is the first one we've talked about.
I'd like to go first on this one because my favorite gun is, I know we've been hating on Call of Duty, but the simple pistol plus knife combination combination in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is the most fun thing to do because you go around in a single player game and you just stab 25 people and then you'd hit a nuke button and people would be like, I never got shot once by him. Even though it's technically not a gun, it was just so much fun to be able to do that.
I think my favorite gun in an FPS, given the fact that I've only played the Metroid Prime series, would be the sound beam that was in Prime 3, because that was really cool and just let you insta-kill certain bosses in the game, namely the Metroid Hatchers, which is really cool and let you do a lot of unique things in a shooter.
I hope the sound gun made pew noises every time you shoot it.
Well, it made like laser noises because it was a laser, but
Yeah, that's pew sound.
That's all I needed.
Reminds me of the dubstep gun from
Yes, from Saints Row.
Okay.
Saints Row.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do third-person shooters count? Because Saints Row has some goodies.
I would say keep it first person for this question. I'm sorry.
If we're going first person, I have two. I want to say either the Desert Eagle from Counter-Strike, just because of its sound design. It's just so heavy, like you just really feel the impact of each shot. Or the Super Shotgun from Doom Eternal, because you launch a freaking chain into a demon and then you pull it towards you and then blast it in the face, and it's freaking awesome.
Now I feel vastly uncreative, but yeah, shotguns are my personal favorite. I love the moment to moment. I have to make the right decision because if I can get within 5 feet of them, they're not going to be around anymore. And the super shotgun from Doom is the pinnacle of that shotgun experience. Of if I just get off the right shot at this moment in time, there won't be an enemy left there anymore, and I'll be able to move on. And if I mess it up, then I wasn't good enough anyway. So
It is what I like to call the demon confetti maker.
That's pretty good.
So, I believe that brings us to the end of our discussion segment. Is there any other topics somebody would like to bring up?
I would like to bring up Halo was integral to that, like, the Xbox Mountain Dew Dorito culture, if you know what I mean, like that,
True.
like,
Yes.
2000s gamer culture.
Mountain
Chug
Dew
40
gamer fuel.
Right? Like, chug 40 Mountain Dews and eat 50 pounds of Doritos and you'll be the ultimate gamer.
Have the chip bags and the bottle caps, and you can put in a code and get like
You win an Xbox.
extra. Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about those existing.
Right?
You're totally right. Halo did help with that culture.
They put the Master Chief on the shoulder. That promotion is great.
We are now going to move on to the scoring. So, the before category for Halo 1 on the Xbox original, it has earned a 3 in this category. That 3 comes largely from the fact that while Halo's developers had made shooter games previously, they had been isolated mostly to PC and Mac. They had not created a console shooter. There were some existing console shooters, as I'm sure Matt can tell us more about.
The wonderful GoldenEye and Turok. Those games, I mean, to be fair, GoldenEye, which we'll probably talk about on this show at some point, was like the beginning of multiplayer first-person shooters and really doing it right. So getting another great multiplayer shooter.
Being able to play it with a controller with your friends. Yep.
A reasonable controller.
Right. But again, at that time, it had not really been done before outside of things like that on consoles. And then Bungie did have industrial clout. The Halo Combat Evolved keynote address that it was included inside of was given by Steve Jobs at a Mac conference. Well, you can't get them all. So, one important thing I wanted to note in this section before we move on to the game's release was that Seropian and Jones, two of the three who helped establish Bungie, had refused to accept Microsoft's offer until the entire studio agreed to the buyout of Bungie by Microsoft.
Honestly, that's like a really cool thing to do as a company because like making sure like everyone in your company is like, yes, we are okay with this. Is not a thing people do anymore.
And one of the big things that they liked about that switch was that now they would be developing a game for one environment, for one set of specs, and that let them focus a lot more on how they were developing the game, and probably was what enabled it to even be released with the schedule they had.
Question: Was this the first generation of consoles where the companies had dev kits, like kits for developers to use?
I believe that the N64 had a dev kit. Matt, am I correct about that?
I don't actually know on that one. I maybe.
And I'm also pretty sure the PS1 and I know the PS2 did. I think the PS1 did.
It's looking like the answer might be yes. It would make sense considering that a lot of N64 games, like nowadays are getting modded to have other N64 games run in them.
I would say this was around that time, Kai. Yes, so the N64, PS2, Xbox original. Yeah,
So, right, you were talking about a single development environment. They know exactly what hardware they're working with, like what API, so I'm wondering if, like, I don't know.
they probably helped develop whatever kits were being used, considering they were a launch title. How closely they were working with Microsoft. Yeah. So the during portion, we gave Halo a 5 here because the game exploded in popularity all over the West.
You cannot look at the 2000s and early 2010s without seeing FPS games everywhere.
They dominated their genre entirely. They did over here in the West what RPGs did in Japan, I would say.
Yeah, like you couldn't go to the grocery store or the gas station without seeing Master Chief because they put Master Chief in the soda.
They did.
I was going to say that it's kind of not surprising because we're American.
They put the Master Chief in the soda.
They got a working brand, and the influence of that and the size of the games you could have with Halo with its multiplayer also helped establish esports as a whole, which I don't think in 2001 there was such a thing as Counter-Strike Global Offensive, really.
There was not.
If you were doing a big online game with other people, you were doing it with Halo, and as we'll mention later, they had some of the first big tournaments like that. So we did give them a 5 in this category. And then for the then section, they also earned a 5. Every game we've covered this far has had 5s in during and then, but that's because all the games we've covered thus far helped sell their consoles. Like, they were the shelf life movers, the console sellers. So it's not very surprising that they earned that high of points here and there. It helped Xbox to become the shooter console. I personally would wind up buying a 360 to play games like Fallout, Borderlands, Halo 3, and COD. And as an interesting side note during this period, this was also around the time when Games Workshop would start threatening to sue people over calling things Space Marines. And so that's why it's very important to remember they're Spartans.
It's very important. We don't want Warhammer coming after us.
It's incredibly important to remember they are Spartans.
Right.
So eventually Halo 2 would come out. They introduced akimbo, guns, energy swords. I like the gunplay in 2 a lot more than 1, I have to say. And Halo 3, however, was the one that I played the most. And Matt, was also the one you played the most, right?
You don't know how many hours I spent in the Forge. So many hours. It was also fun to figure out find the maps that people had downloaded. I guess it would be a mod to overput items into the game. So you'd have maps that were race courses, and those were also a lot of fun. It just was it was the beginning of that multiplayer era of being oh, this game is meant for one thing, and then you'd find, oh, here's 50 different maps that do 50 different game modes.
I would be willing to say that the kind of craziness you'll see in things like GTA 5 Online, those kinds of traditions were started by Halo 3.
And also, I'll say the other one, which is kind of Fortnite as well, how it has a bazillion modes in it. But the difference was when Halo 3, it was just the community doing it ourselves.
Matt, how dare you credit Fortnite?
I'm saying that Halo helped Fortnite, not the other way around.
I'm just saying, how dare you bring up Fortnite in general?
3 also had Zombie Tag as a multiplayer game mode, and that was so much fun.
I forgot about Zombie Tag. Oh, you're right, it's so much fun.
So after 3, we then got Halo Reach, which first time in the series you're not playing as Master Chief. You are playing as unless you count ODST.
We don't.
Oh, brutal.
Sorry.
Okay. You play as Noble 6 in a team of Spartans, all called Nobles. It is a prequel to the first Halo game. And I believe this was the last one developed by Bungie, correct?
Yes. The divorce happened, and Microsoft got to keep the kids. The world has gotten a little darker since. Yeah.
So Reach is regarded as the beginning of the end for Halo, so to speak, because after Reach, we got 4
comes out,
which had its fans, but
it wasn't Halo 3.
It was not
Reach.
Halo 3. It was not Reach. People could tell, behind the scenes stuff had changed. And then we have Halo 5.
Now we start going into the modern day. Yes.
Yeah. Halo 5 was a controversial one.
Halo in the modern day, it earned a score of 3 for the now category, and that has largely been because of its treatment by its current owners. The Halo remaster was incredibly controversial. There were some good points, like the ability to just turn off the remaster entirely by hitting a button.
What if we made a game and we remade it, but you could just turn off the remake and it was better as the old way?
I will say the best way to play the remaster is to turn on the cool graphics when you're outside and turn on the old graphics whenever you're indoors.
Except for when you're trying to shoot around a tree.
Yes, be very careful of that. So one thing they also did that was a strict upgrade were the added cutscenes that you could find in the remake, particularly the one where Captain Keyes is struggling against the Flood. If you are at all a fan of Halo and you have not seen that cutscene, I strongly recommend watching it.
It's real cool.
It is incredible performance. Now, Halo has had a television show produced by Amazon. It's not exactly been super successful, I would say.
It is a disgrace.
It's honestly really sad because they've made some shows recently that have been, I would say, not maybe the best things in the world, but still good. And then the Halo one was just like, what are you doing?
I think it's one of those things where Master Chief was designed at least partially to be a self-insert. He's supposed to be you, but an action hero in a space epic. And when you have to turn that into a real character, things can get weird. However, there is still Bungie. They do still exist in the modern day. They made Destiny and Destiny 2. Now, Destiny and Destiny 2 both have their own complications, but I think it would be remiss to say that they have not been successful in their own ways, at least at times, and that Halo did not have an influence on them, because it absolutely did. Marathon had an influence on the Destiny games. There's a gun based off of a Marathon story event.
Oh, that pause made me think it was just because there was a gun.
I was going to say that I bought Destiny on release and remember thinking it was going to be like the next Halo, and was very sad when it was not.
That brings us to the latest Halo game by 343, Halo Infinite, which has also had a very messy development, but I have heard it is playable now. It is not a horrendous experience, and that a little bit of the life from before was injected into it. So if you are a fan of the series, maybe now's the time to take a second look at it.
I have seen recently by some of the content creators I follow and some of my friends who follow the Halo series very closely. They say Infinite is currently on an upturn. Like, its quality and its maps, its game modes, it's really, I hear it's getting much better. So if you've had a Halo itch for a while, 4 and 5 haven't been doing it, definitely, I would say, like we said, definitely check out Infinite.
To tangent just a tiny bit, it feels like a lot of games nowadays are, the game starts out bad and they make the game good, which is sad. But yeah, a lot of games will have been getting better. Like Cyberpunk 77 is another one of those games where I've heard that it started out really bad and then people are like, oh, that game actually ended up really good.
Cyberpunk on last gen consoles like the Xbox One and PS4, it was so buggy and bad you literally couldn't finish the game.
I didn't know it was that bad.
I think one big thing about the whole games releasing bad then getting good is the fact that some developers have just realized, well, if it's bad, we can just update it. So they don't pour every single ounce of love that they possibly can into the initial release, because they can just fix it later.
Right, they're of the mindset of, we'll just patch it.
On the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, I would hope that would mean that less developers are vastly overworking themselves with tons of overtime, but I'm smart enough to know that, no, they're just doing both. They're both working crazy amounts of overtime and releasing unfinished products, and that is sad.
Yes, and it's mostly due to the fact that it's all been taken over by corporate executives who don't care about anything other than profit margins.
Money.
I will say that as far as Halo is concerned, I think its single strongest influence has been on the Borderlands series, especially in the modern day. You can see almost all of Halo's mechanics somewhere in Borderlands.
They took inspiration from the Halo TV series by making the Borderlands movie also bad.
We're not getting into Borderlands here. The first game was good. I'm just gonna leave it at that. All right, now Matt can talk.
Oh, I thought we were just going to go to bonus stars at this point. I feel like we should go to bonus stars.
All right, sure. The first star they earn is for headlines. It was a launch title. They had the Halo Combat Evolved Championship in 2001. Putting esports on your back as much as Halo did is worth mentioning. People were very aware of this game and its existence. It got a lot of press coverage.
Also, the soundtrack, a lot of people will recognize, I mean, not like in the games, but like the intro is a very iconic thing. And another big one for headlines wise is the existence of Rooster Teeth. The whole thing happening, the beginning of online content being like models, like for animation, that was like one of those first what people when I know a lot of people that are animators were like that was the start of that. And that was all because of Halo. They did a good amount of it with the Halo models.
In the multiplayer, yeah. So Red versus Blue, RB and the Chief, a lot of early internet content was based around Halo. And Rooster Teeth has gone on to do a lot of things. If you want to know more about them, please look it up on your own.
Although they recently just shut down.
Yeah.
But most of their things have been bought up and restarted with very passionate fervor.
That is good, but the original Rooster Teeth has since shut down, unfortunately.
Yeah, they had their issues.
I definitely enjoyed Red vs. Blue as a teenager. I had more fun with that series than I should have.
It was great.
Studio support. So we are giving them a star here for the remake, even though it has its problems. Microsoft has consistently tried to make Halo games playable on their systems. I believe that Halo 2 was playable on a 360, even though it was an Xbox original game, because Microsoft wanted people to be able to keep playing Halo.
This is correct.
We will be giving them the star here, in spite of some blunders made by certain companies.
When you say remaster, you're referring to the Master Chief Collection, correct?
Yes, the one included in the collection, the one by Saber Interactive and 343.
Gotcha.
That is to say Saber Interactive.
I just wanted to clarify.
And they've also earned a star for organized play because, again, esports and their involvement there. The construction, yes. So console multiplayer had existed previously. See the Dreamcast, sadly.
I don't know if that counts.
But at least in the West, absolutely, it was the Xbox that popularized online multiplayer, and it came in force. It wound up making a huge industry out of online multiplayer games. Every COD game success owes at least a little bit of its heritage to Halo 1. We're giving it the point for construction. And then as far as personal taste, I think there's something fun in Halo for just about everyone. It's a good game, even if it's a little rough on the edges.
I know Joe doesn't like first-person shooters, but I also give it my thumbs up.
As an admittedly biased take, I just simply did not enjoy the FPS elements because I just don't like FPS games. But I can respect everything that was going for as a game, as a story, and all that stuff.
And then I wanted to make a note that Halo 1 does not win the unintended enjoyment star because of the number of things Bungie did to make that enjoyment part of the experience. How goofy the grunts are, grunt birthday party, the kind of flexibility people do with the online multiplayer from things like Red versus Blue, all of it, they wanted that to happen. They wanted that to be the experience. So
I will say before we do that, the ragdolling though is very fun to watch.
it is. Does anyone have anything else to add before the final scoring?
I mean, it's like you said, a lot of like everything in the game was intended to be enjoyed. You know, it's not like Skyrim where half of the enjoyment is how broken the game is. So I think it's a testament to the game's development and passion, and I agree it does earn that point.
It may not get the star for it, but we do appreciate it for it.
Now we are at the end. The score that Halo 1 for Xbox has received, based on the cultural impact it has had, is 2187, which puts it 40 points behind Metal Gear Solid 1. It is 4th place on our listings thus far, but again, that is going up against the biggest and brightest games that helped move entire companies into gaming spotlight.
And I say it definitely earns a spot with those games.
For sure, still hit over 2,000,
Right.
which is going to happen significantly less as we get into different games. All right. There is, in fact, one thing you need to know about Halo's grunts before we leave off. And that's that we're all gonna die! We're all gonna die!